And she was here, she was living with him.
Hey, Michael. I think it's good you're looking for something to file the cards away.
Yes, I'm gonna be doing that. They got left out there. When he's not Shabbat. Okay. No, it was the answer.
Arthur, yourself. Good. It's been a couple of years.
Well, exactly.
But you're doing okay?
Yeah, thank God.
Still taking care of the doggies?
Oh, yeah. I just found out. Just like that. It was kind of like in my grandfather.
We asked him for face like that. Why so much in advance?
Yeah, we can have it sometime.
Next year, Mark invited us all.
That's right, everybody's welcome.
You sleep on the beach.
Doesn't matter. That's why I sleep on the beach.
You sleep on the beach?
Which Coast Guard waters to West Coast?
We're at Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that is. Mexican geography.
Pacific.
Pacific, okay. Heard the name, but yeah. So that's south, way south of Albuquerque.
Slightly.
No, it's there south. I once went to Club Med. No, Cuba, but I used to.
I went to see him once. Yeah. I went with Ari, we went there once, but I got, it's not a place to visit really. It's very depressing.
Good evening, everybody. Our Mincha service begins on page 595. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Oli Alu Chaseda. Not Asher Roshem Shalat David and Bamayam Neparoch Oshimuchol Yolom Beroch. Thank you. Chanun v'rachum Adonai Chapayim Agadol Chosui Tov Adonai Lakov Rachamo V'Kom Asobiyah. Tilat Adonai Yedav Pi V'Rekabal Sashim Kodshorin V'Ve Manachnu Nevarech Yam Yatav Yadolam Hallelujah Tova Letzion young, V'yata kadosh Yoshef Tilot Yisrael V'karazel Ze V'yamar Kadosh V'atis V'nim Ravesh Macharai Karash Kadol Baruch Kevod Adonai Mimekomo Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Vahed. You can just fill the cup and take just fill the cup and take the grape Baruch HaGever Asher Tabadonai V'haya Adonai Miftacho B'chuv Adonai Adayat Ki v'ya Adonai Yetzon Amim V'yiftachu V'chayidei Shemecha Ki lo zavta Doshecha Adonai Adonai Chafetz Leman Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'yadir Yitgadal V'yitgadal Shemei Rabbah V'yamad Rachirutei V'yamnich Malachutei B'chayechon V'yom Echon V'chayedecho Beit Yisrael V'agalav Yizman Kariv V'yimeru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Li'olam Omer Maya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishtabach Yitpavit Shemam V'yitnasei V'yitadar V'yitele V'yithalal Shmei Kudsha B'richu Le'ela Mikol B'chata V'shirata Tushb'chata V'nechemata Tamiran B'yalma V'yimeru Amen. The Amid, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Turn to page 771 for the Amidah. We follow along with the rabbi to the bottom of page 775 for the Kedusha for Mincha, and then continue with silent devotion.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel HaChasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol v'Zochei Chasdei Avot ומביא גולים לבניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר מושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחי מתים אתה רב להושיע מחלקל החיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ברופא חולים עתי אסורים וכאמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות מידו מלך מימית ומחי מצמיח ישועה ונאמנת על החיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים נקדש נקדשנו בעולם כשמש שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וכרזה אל זה ויאמר ליומתם ברוך ימירו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם ולא ירצין דבדו עלויה לדבדו נגיד גודלך ונצא נצחים קדושתך נקדיש שבח עלינו מפין למשלם ויקם ים כתב קדוש ברוך אתה אדוני ההן הקדוש אתה וחתנו ותיתן לנו על מועדים לשמחה יעלה ויבוא ויגיע ויראה וירצה וישמע כזה ثابت الساخن أتبك لأخل راقم ميخ ونقسم مقسم ويسر شلوم علينا وياكل إسرائيل
Page 235.
יתגדל ויתגדל שמי רבה יעמד ירחירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייך ובמכון ובחייך בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קרב ימרו יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולימי ימיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר מן ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה ברכו לעילה מנקו בחטא ושירתה דרוגתה ונחמתה דאמירה ממגמרו אמן תקבל אצלו תנבא ותהון דכל ישראל קדם דשמיא ממרו אמן יהי שלמה רבה משמיים וחיים עלינו והכל ישראל ממרו אמן עושה שמרמה והוא יעשה שלום עלינו והכל ישראל ממרו אמן עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל עתיד שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה שלא שמנו וגאור עלינו ככל עמונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך
and 41. Yitgadal v'yishkadash shemei rabah, v'yalma divram kirute, v'yamlev malchute, v'chaye echad, v'yom echad, v'chaye d'kol Beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kariv, v'yamru amen.
Amen.
Yesh le'rabah mevorach le'olam le'amaya, v'yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitparar, v'yitraman, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemei v'yushav v'yuru, v'leila minkol birkata v'shirata, tishbekata v'nechamata, ta'amiran v'yama v'yamru
Amen.
V'yehei shlama rava Mincha Maariv, v'chayim aleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
Amen.
V'yiseh shalom b'mromav, hu yavaseh shalom aleinu v'yalkol Yisrael v'yamru
Amen. Please be seated. We have about 15 minutes till the end of Yom Tov, so we can't quite daven Maariv yet. And firstly, I want to thank you for coming out. I think I'll have to ask more often for a minute. This is great. I wanted to take this time to talk about some of the peculiar nuances of Pesach. You know, I hear people say, well, you know, Pesach finishes at 8, whatever it is, 8:29 or 8:30, whatever it is. We're going to be right at IGA at a quarter of 9 to buy our chametz and you know, or real bagel, wherever they go. I don't know. So, you know, is that permitted? Can we do that? And the answer is, we're not supposed to. And the question is, why? Why are we not supposed to run out right after Yom Tov and go and buy the chametz? Not only might it one of the problems that we're faced with is most of the stuff in the stores that you'll buy immediately after Yom Tov was made either on or during Yom Tov. And because part of the prohibition, according to the Torah, is not only to have chametz in your possession, but it's to benefit in any way, shape, or form from chametz during Pesach, or chametz that was created during Pesach that you can't even benefit from it afterwards. So most people do a couple of things. They either wait until the next morning, and then, you know, the bakeries like in IGA, they bake fresh overnight, and they sort of, so you know you're okay there. Or some people actually wait 24 hours before they go, before they do that. Obviously, if you had any chametz in your possession before Yom Tov, which you sold under your Mechirat Chametz, well, we know within about 30 minutes after the Yom Tov, that reverts back, or should revert back to the owner, unless the guy really paid up and bought the Chametz. And yeah, then you've got a problem. but at that point, then you could eat that Chametz, because it wasn't yours during the Chag. It had been sold, it didn't belong to you, so you could eat that Chametz, so you're good there. Somebody asked me a question during the week when we were over at Shaare Zedek, that they didn't realize, I happened to mention it as we were sitting at the table over breakfast, that they didn't realize that there are products that, as long as they were purchased before Pesach, that don't contain any chametz, you could buy before Pesach and keep and eat over Pesach, that don't require a kosher for Pesach sticker. So things like milk, things like sugar, things like eggs, things like pure juices. So the rule is that any item that is not chametz prior to Pesach doesn't suddenly become chametz because it's Pesach. Okay? So as long as it's purchased before Pesach, you can use it on Pesach. So for instance, Elizabeth, she'll go to IGA the morning erev Pesach, and she'll buy, let's say, I don't know, 3 or 4 cartons of milk, and that should last us all the way through Pesach. Doesn't need to have the kosher Pesach symbol. Coffee. Yes, you can actually have your Tim's coffee pods, that you have during the year, or Starbucks, whatever you choose. The coffee pods. Why? Because there is no, there's nothing there that's chametz, unless you're buying a coffee that's blended. You've got to be very careful, because you have some coffees that are blended They're mixed with things to give it, I don't know, some of these very fandangled.
Flavored.
Flavored, I couldn't think of the word, thank you. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Flavored coffee, you've got to be very careful because we don't know what it's flavored with and if that could contain a chametz. So the question was asked me, well, firstly, the lady didn't know about this and she said it will save her a lot of pain and money by not having to worry about getting it. But the question was, why is it permissible to buy it before Passover and eat it during Passover, but it's not permitted to go during Passover to the store and buy the same product? Why? I mean, if it's good enough before, why? And the answer is because of the law. We have a law in Judaism called, in Kashrut, called the law of Batel B'Shishim. Batel B'Shishim means the 1 in 60 rule. So what is the 1 in 60 rule? The 1 in 60 rule means that, let's say on a regular day, you were cooking, I don't know, a stew, a big pot of stew on your stove at home. And those who have little kids that run around with bottles of milk or whatever it is, happen to run into the kitchen, they slip on the floor, and some of the milk goes up and into the pot of stew. What happens? Have to throw it out? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It all depends on what the amount of the offending item was. The rabbis tell us if the offending item was less than 1/60th of the total, you don't throw it out. In fact, quite to the contrary, you shouldn't throw it out because then you have the laws of Bal Tashchit, which is the laws of wastage. So as long as it wasn't the offending item wasn't a product that is either non-kosher, that is strong enough to change the taste of the original stew, and it's less than 1/60th of the total quantity, then you're okay. So then somebody asks me, well, where did they come in? Why 160? Why not 170? And that is to do with Roman counting at the time. So don't ask me any more than that because I'd actually know. It's to do with the mathematics that they used during the Roman period of how to hit it on.
Babylonian.
Oh, was it Babylonia? I thought it was Roman.
Babylonia had a base 60.
Ah, base 60, there you go. Okay, I knew it was one of them. Okay. Thank
I don't
you.
know much more beyond that.
You don't know how it worked, the base 60 rule?
I don't know, but I do know the reason why we've got 60 seconds to a minute is because that comes from Babylonia.
There you go. You see what you like?
Let's have a historian.
Degrees on the
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
So if anybody tells you that Judaism doesn't do what's called religious appropriation, taking it from other places, you know it's not true. So you've got the 1 in 60 rule, okay? So the 1 in 60 rule. So now let's go back to our Passover scenario. So the rabbi said that if anything before Pesach, which wouldn't ordinarily be chametz, it doesn't have a seal that says kosher or kosher for Pesach, but there's nothing that makes it chametz. We don't suspect, or we shouldn't suspect, that there could be something in it that makes it chametz. We shouldn't suspect that. And especially the way we manufacture today. We manufacture it very, very differently. So if there is, by some chance, something that's in there that might be, maybe when they were milking the cow, the guy was eating a sandwich and dropped a couple of crumbs in the milk, it would be the 1 in 60 rule would kick in anyway. So before Pesach, you're perfectly fine. But if it happened on Pesach, if he was eating a sandwich on Pesach when he was milking the cow, and it went in, the 1 in 60 rule doesn't apply when it comes to chametz on Pesach, because the Torah says you shall not have any benefit. It's not just ownership, it's benefit. So that's why we've got this, what seems to be a very bizarre set of rules when it comes to food, but it's actually quite logical. It actually makes a lot of sense. So that I just wanted to explain that. Then, by the way, does anybody have any questions regarding Pesach, regarding any of the things that we do or don't do? No questions? Okay. So the other question, of course, was what Rabbi Leff was talking about here when he was here on second day of Yom Tov, which I've addressed with you on a number of occasions, and that is why in Israel the festival finished last night. In other words, why we observe an extra day, and indeed, should we continue to observe the extra day? I mean, we have computerization today. We know exactly in Israel, we follow Israel's laws for a lot of things when it comes to halachic guidelines. The rabbinate, the chief rabbinate of the state of Israel, is following a lot of guidelines. Isn't sort of the time right to perhaps say, you know what, we need outside of Israel to align our Jewish calendar, our ritual calendar with Israel? What could be the justification of not doing that now? The calendar that we have was designed at the time. It was necessary to have this additional day because, as he explained, by the time the messages got outside of Israel to the outlying communities, they couldn't be sure that they actually got there in time to notify them in preparation that it was a holiday. So they extended it by 1 day extra. But do we really need to have it today? I would say that the time has come, perhaps, that we look at that. And I mean, the conservative movement has, and there are a number of communities across North America that have actually switched over to what we call the Israel calendar. The Reform movement 100% did it years ago. Okay, I believe the Reconstructionist has done it as well. Where it creates some very, very interesting scenarios is in some Orthodox communities in Europe. And one of those communities, I happen to know people that live in one of them in London. In one of the Orthodox communities, it's creating quite a conflict. If we just digress a little bit, the rabbis have ruled both in Israel and certainly in England, I don't know about in France, that anybody who purchases a home in Israel, whether it be a home they're going to live in permanently or whether it's a vacation home, and they go there for the holidays, they observe the holidays under the calendar of Israel. If you go to a hotel for a vacation, you can't. You've got to observe the holiday as you would do outside of Israel. So the question is why? Why the difference? If I'm going for a 3-week holiday and it includes Passover, I should be able to do what the Israelis do. Okay? The rabbi said no. And the difference being is they say that if you buy a home in Israel, whether it be to live there full time or whether it be for a vacation home, whether it be for a vacation home, the intent must be that ultimately you're going to go and live in Israel. I mean, why else would you buy a home there? Doesn't make sense. And therefore, because you're going for the holidays, and don't forget to go from Paris to Tel Aviv is 3.5 hours. From London, it's 4 hours. It's very quick. People go all the time. They go for the weekend. They'll go on a Thursday night. They go Friday, Shabbos, Sunday they fly home, and that's what it happens all the time. It's very cheap to go, and people do this. So what they said was, if you own a home there, you only have to. Okay, now bear that in mind. So then you have a lot of people. You have a lot of people in Europe, especially in England, that have holiday homes in Israel. Netanya, Yerushalayim, Tel Aviv. And what started to happen now in a lot of these communities, people will go to Israel for Yom Tov. I think if you saw it last week, Israel announced the busiest holiday period in recent history, this Yom Tov, this Pesach. So they'll go to, let's say, to Israel for Pesach. When does Pesach finish? Finished yesterday, right? Or, finished last night. So what they'll do is, they'll get on the plane, the next day, and they'll fly back to their Orthodox communities in London. And they go from the airport, of course, in their cars or taxis, and they pull up, and people are coming out of shul in their Orthodox thing. Or they'll go to their offices. They have, technically, the blessing to do so. And so now it's starting to cause people to think, well, we live in such close proximity to Israel, and we have such a connection now with Israel, we should be adopting the calendar period, which would mean that Pesach would be 1 day shorter. Okay, so you could have your chametz a day earlier if you really have to have it. Sukkot would be a day shorter, and Shavuot would only be 1 day instead of 2 days. Rosh Hashanah stays 2 days; it doesn't change.
Why?
Why? Because it's actually It's actually referred to in the Talmud not as 2 days, but it's called Yom Da'arachta, which means it's considered as one long day. We weren't 100% sure. You see, you've got to understand that Rosh Hashanah is actually not mentioned anywhere in the Torah. It was actually a creation of the rabbis. What the Torah says, it says, which means on the first day of the 7th month, Yom Teruah Yelachem. It shall be a day of sounding of the trumpets. And then it says Yom Zichron Teruah Yelachem. It should be a day of remembering the sounding of the trumpets. That's all it says. That's it. Nothing else. Nothing else. Rosh Hashanah wasn't created until the rabbinic period. And why was it created? It was created because the Torah talks about on the 10th day of the month, of the 7th month, there shall be a holy convocation where you shall afflict your souls. What we call Yom Kippur. Okay, Yom Kippurim hu would be a day of atonement. Okay, and it talks about that. So the rabbi said, rather than just sort of work up to the 10th day, we should create this period and we'll bring it all together. How did they bring it together? They created this idea of turning the first day of the 7th month of sounding of the trumpets as an opening to ultimately leading to Yom Kippur. So we don't find anything about Rosh Hashanah until the rabbinic period. And the rabbis then created that in such a way, because it's mentioned twice in the Torah of sounding of the trumpets and remembering to sound the trumpets, they created it as they consider it as one long day, not 2 separate days. That's why even in Israel. Now, not everybody agrees with that opinion. Some people say no, actually, it used to be one day. They find it sort of roundabout in the 7th century. It was one day in Israel. But then, when large groups started to do in waves of the sort of initial aliyah to Israel, they brought 2 days with them, and they kept them as 2 days, and so it gradually became adopted. I don't know if historically that's valid, but anyway, that's the way that goes. So we're going back to Pesach. So
what happened with our electric power that went off on Wednesday night? Didn't come back until Sunday night or Monday morning, some of us, and it was Pesach.
correct. And I've got news for you, Nancy. You might or might not be aware of this, but up until about, I would say up until about the 17th century, most people didn't have electricity anyway. They had candles. They had oil, they had lamps, they had oil lamps, they had fires. So we're sort of spoiled by electricity. So those of us that could, they put out candles, and we had our Seder nights by candlelight. So what? It was very nice.
I didn't understand. It was the cooking that we couldn't do that bothered me, yes. Because there was only electric power in my place.
So with Mada, they use sterno and chafing dishes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yeah, shaving. I mean, it was interestingly enough that here what they did was, I didn't notice, although it's gas upstairs, the gas is pumped by electricity up to the 2nd floor. So of course when they actually went out, the gas went out as well. However, everything was well heated and it kept hot. So they did a great job. You know what, at the end of the day, it's not about what happens to us, it's about how we deal with what happens. And I've got to tell you, we had a beautiful Seder here. There were some 63, 64 people here. Done by, I mean, you were here, right? It was by tea lights on the table, candles. If you don't let something derail you, it won't. If you allow it to derail you, it will. And we didn't, and we had a great time.
Walking down the stairs.
Walking down the stairs was a little bit more difficult, but that's why you held on to the.
You should get special lights for that downstairs.
So, but even in our home on the 2nd night, so what, we put out candles, and we really sort of did live the plague of the darkness. But we could see that, and they couldn't. All right, I think we're right there at 8:30. So it's Maariv.
Maariv. So we turn to page 243. 243 for Maariv for weekdays.
Yeah, it's regular Maariv.
Okay.
Please rise.
And please rise for the Baruch Hu.
Vahura Chumikapera von Volo Shachid, Viherbala Shiva Volo Yir Kolmata, Adonai Hoshi Hamelach Yaninu Vayom Korenu, Baruch et Adonai Hamavora, Baruch Adonai Vorach Lilam Vaed, Baruch Adonai. Umavir Yom Umavi Laila, Umabdil Ben Yom Vein Laila, Adonai Zvot Shemo, El Chai Kayam Tamid, Eloch Leinu Lavaed, Baruch Adonai, Hamaariv Aravim, Avad Olam Beit Yisrael Ki Chaim Chayenu V'Yirach Yemenu, Uva Nega Yamam V'Laila, V'Aftaka Al Tasur Mimenu Li'Alamim, Baruch Adonai, Oev Amo Yisrael.
247.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Rosh Hashanah, V'Yafta Et Adonai Le'Lecha, B'Kol V'Aftaka, B'Kol Nafshka, B'Kol Modeka, V'Hayu Ha'Dorim Alei Asher Nakimet Yachiyam L'Vavacha, V'Shinatam L'Veneka, V'Tipuntam, V'Shivteka, V'Veteka, V'Lachta V'Darech, V'Shavteka V'Kamecha, Ukshatam Yot Azadecha, V'Yilat Tafot Beinenecha, Uchtatam, V'Mazazat Beiteka, V'Yisharecha, V'Mam Yim Shemo Shemo. Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Read down page 249.
Umalchuta b'ratzon b'kulu Elohem Moshe v'nei Yisrael lachatnu shirat b'simcha rabav v'yamru chulom mi chamocha be'elim Adonai mi chamocha neder b'kodesh nora tehillah osefele malchutecha harahu v'necha Bokei Yam Lifnei Moshe Ze'eli Anu V'Yamru Adonai Yimlach Li'olam Va'ed V'nemar Kifata Adonai Yad Yaakov U'Golo Miyad Azak Mimenu Baruch Adonai Go'al Yisrael Ashkivenu Eloheinu Shalom Mikmatenu Malkeinu Chayim Urushalim Shabbat Shmerechim U'shemor tzatenu uvenu l'chayim u'shalam mayatav yadalam Baruch Adonai shomer amo Yisrael la'ad Baruch Adonai lilam amen v'yamen Baruch Adonai b'tzion shegen Yerushalayim Hallelujah Baruch Adonai Elohim Yisrael. כי המלכות שלך היא מלאה עד תמלא פי-כבוד, כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך בכבודו תמיד, ימלוך עלינו עולם ועד, ועל כל מעשיו. יתקדש קדש שמי רבה, ויעמד יברך יראה וימלך מלכותי, וחייכון וביומכון וחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה וזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם למעלה רמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ותהלל שמי לקודש ובריחו, לעילו מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירון ביומו ויאמרו אמן.
Amen. The silent Amida begins on page 257, concludes on 275. Page 277.
יתקדש קדש שמי רבה, יעמד יברך יראה וימלך מלכותי, וחייכון וביומכון וחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה וזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם למעלה מיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ותהלל שמי לקודש ובריחו, לעילו מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירון ביומו ויאמרו אמן. תסקבל תולדון ובתכון תכל ישראל, קדם אביון דשמיא ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיא, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום ברמה, ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. 285.
I believe it's 287.
Well, we start off with 285.
We're counting the Omer.
Counting the Omer, page 285.
Hineni mochan amazoman, hineni mochan amazoman, hineni mochan amazoman, elekayi mitzvot aseh shasfirat haomer, kemo shekatuv b'Torah, hineni mochan amazoman. No וספרתם לכם ממחרת השבת, הנני מוכן ומזומן, מיום אביאכם אסור מהתנופה, 7 שבתות תמימות תהיינה, עד ממחרת השבת לפי תשבו 50 יום. Last night we counted 7. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddishanu v'zavetzivanu al sefiras omer hayom shmona yamim shehim shavua echad v'yom echad omer harachmanu yachad v'nonu abadet beit hamikdash v'mikam amir v'yameinu amen.
We turn back to page 279 for Aleinu.
Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol atei gedula lioseh breshit shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aretzot v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'tam shelo sam chelkeinu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu ומשתחווים ומועדים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
So, ויודעת רואים ושיב אז לא הגיע לנו ידי מהשמיים
כך כתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלך לעולם ועד
ונאמר
והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ
ביום ההוא
יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
It is not the custom during the month of Nisan to make memorial prayers. We do at this time recognize the followings whose yahrzeits are beginning this evening. Sharon Reinish, Aliyah Hashalom, wife, mother and daughter-in-law of Mark, of Bradley, of Megan and of Sandra. To Barnett Mindling, grandfather of Leonard Miller, and to Mitchell Allen Hopkins, brother of Marla Hopkins. Sandra Cohen, sister of Harvey Lyman. Adonai Zachareseni Hishmot Sarah Bas Moshe v'Michaela Dobin Yaakov Tevya Mendel Alirin Ben Yaakov Sandra Cohen Shalchu Li'olam Ha'amon Avrachim Yasichot Tinafshom Tzor B'tzor Chaim Otehi Manuchatam Kavod V'nomar Amen.
For those in mourning and observing Yahrzeit, Morris Kaddish, page 281. Yisgadal, Yisgadash, Merabah, Yalmat, Yivrak, Yiritei, Yalif, Malkutei, Chayev, On, Yom Echon, Chayev, Techol, Beis Yisrael, Ba'agalav, Yizman, Kariv, Yivramen, Yehei, Shmei, Rabba, Mehorat, Elam, Umei, Amaya, Yisparak, Yishtavat, Yisparar, Yisraman, Yitnaseh, Yizadar, Yizaleh, Yizalal, Shmei, Kutsha, Berikut, Le'elah, Minkol, Birkata, B'shirata, Twish Birkata, V'nechamata, Kagnara, V'navan, Yiruramen, Yehesh, Lama, Rabba, Mishamaya, B'chayim, Aleinu, V'yalko, Yisrael, Yiruramen.
Amen.
Oiseh Shalom, Yivrama, Uyaseh Shalom,
Aleinu v'yalko Yisrael
Amen. Please rise for the Havdalah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ba'orei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam v'kodesh lecha ben alecha oshech ben Yisrael oamim ben yamash v'lesheshet yimei hamaseh. Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. And it's over. It's a wrap. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you for coming out this evening and wrapping up this holiday with a beautiful minyan. Thank you.
The service is tomorrow, 7:30.
7:30 a.m. Shaare Zedek.
Friday night? Friday night?
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning is Shaare.
You mentioned buying the food from